Remake, and now we know that Hellraiser Remake is going to Hulu. We don't have a whole lot more info beyond that. We don't know if it's going to be like a literal remake in the sense that it's going to be telling the same exact story, or if it's going to try something new. All we know is it's being hailed as a remake. We also know that this is one of two different Hellraiser projects on the way. HBO Max is working on a Hellraiser TV series, which is going to be directed by David Gordon Green. So there's going to be plenty of Hellraiser in our future for whatever reason.
Interesting.
It is Spyglass Entertainment, who is also doing the new Scream movie.
Interesting. Okay, we'll keep an eye on that, and that is coming to Hulu probably sometime next year, I'm guessing?
Casting yet, or shooting, so yeah, probably next year.
Okay, let's go on to another remake or prequel or sequel, whatever you want to call it. It's the Willy Wonka origin story that we never knew we wanted.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that Slash Film readers are always commenting about, it's like, man, I really need to know more about Willy Wonka and where he came from, because it's just not enough in the movies to show why he loves candy so much. So we're going to get an origin story. It's called Wonka, creatively, and Warner Brothers is making it, and they've put Timothée Chalamet into the role of Willy Wonka, following in the footsteps of Gene Wilder and Johnny Depp from the previous big screen adaptations of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But since this is a prequel, before Willy Wonka ever opens a chocolate factory, it will take place before the events of Roald Dahl's actual book. But the one thing it does share with those other two movies is that it will have musical numbers. So Timothée Chalamet is currently preparing to do song and dance routines for the first time. Just two.
Brad, I have a couple questions for you. Yes. So first of all, that original movie adaptation of Willy Wonka, if you're a child watching that, what part of that movie excites you the most?
It's 100% the Chocolate Factory. The Chocolate Factory is this crazy magical place, and he was even still pretty cool in Tim Burton's weird warped version of it. And so, like, I don't care what Willy Wonka was doing before this. Like, I know he found the Oompa Loompas at Loompa Land. I know that he liked candy enough to open up a factory, and that's all I need to know. I don't need a whole series of adventures of like, oh, how did Willy Wonka get his top hat? They'll probably have some stupid explanation like Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade about how he gets his hat.
They'll be like, we'll call you Wonka. No, you mentioned the Tim Burton Johnny Depp movie that we've probably all forgotten at this point. But what's your least favorite part of that movie? I was gonna say that it's the part where you actually get some backstory.
I mean, that's probably a fair estimate of what the worst part is. But yeah, that movie was just such a weird mess of whatever.
So I guess my point here, Brad, is they're throwing out the thing that is the most exciting about the original and expanding on the part that I think people like the least of the last one. So, Chris, what are the chances that this movie will be any good?
This is just such a dumb idea. Everything about this is dumb. We do not need this. We do not need the Timothée Chalamet Wonka. I mean, first of all, he seems really wrong for that part to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But second of all, like...
Yeah, how does he match up against Gene Wilder?
I think his casting is good for the character, and that's mostly based on seeing what he did on SNL. He's not afraid to like do weird, funny things, be comedic, and that kind of thing. I imagine his performance will probably land somewhere in between Johnny Depp and Gene Wilder. So like I feel like he can do it, but it is also weird that this idea of making Willy Wonka be, hot, young, sexy Timothée Chalamet. But I think the only like thing that maybe gives us hope for this is that it's directed by Paul King, who did the Paddington movies. So
oh yeah, and it's being produced by Lord Miller, who always.
But it's being produced by David Heyman, who did the Harry Potter movies. So
Yeah, but he hasn't done anything good since, though, has he? He did that Secret Garden movie.
I actually don't remember because I didn't see it.
I think.
The Fantastic Beasts movies have been great. So.
God. Okay, I think it's for the best of us to just move on. Let's talk about this news of AMC theaters and what's happening with them, Chris, it has to be like
it's good news for someone. Wanda Group, which is a huge Chinese conglomerate, they previously had a controlling interest in AMC theaters. They've had that since 2012, but it's just been revealed they've sold off basically what amounts to its entire stake in AMC. So this means they're just getting out of the AMC business, which is I guess makes sense right now because no one knows where theater chains are going to be, and part of this is also related to I don't know if anyone even remembers. It feels like it happened 100 years ago at this point, but back in January there was all this stock market shenanigans, not just with GameStop, but it was also with AMC, and part of the reason for Wanda Group getting out is they basically were able to cash out thanks to how the stock rose. I should also add that I don't understand how the stock market works, so all of this is like reading like ancient hieroglyphics to me. So I'm giving you the bare minimum here because I am an idiot who doesn't understand how all of this works. But
well, good news for you, Chris. They're making a movie on it based on a book that hasn't been written. But the guy
I feel like that's going to be more about the GameStop thing than the AMC thing, but we'll see.
Yeah. Does so I guess my question here is because Wanda Group was like this big Chinese company that owned AMC and they invested in it because the movie industry kind of blew up in China in the last couple decades. And I'm wondering, what does this mean for the future of AMC and the future of theatrical?
I don't know. I mean, Wanda, they had about 58.8% of the voting power of AMC stock. So I don't really know if anyone's going to step in to replace them or if AMC is just basically on their own right now. I don't think it fares particularly well for AMC, but I guess we're going to have to wait and see how if and when theaters bounce back. Everything feels like it's still up in the air right now.
Yeah, I think we're going to find out this fall. It's going to determine a lot of what's going to be the future of theatrical entertainment. So stay tuned, listeners. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we'll start first with Loki, which is headed to Disney Plus. There's some news that it's going to. Well, we know that Loki follows Loki in an earlier timeline. It follows him from the events, before the snap. So it's going to have an alternate version of Loki, but it might also have an alternate version of other characters.
Yeah, so we know Loki's going to be time jumping in this series because the Time Variance Authority is being introduced. There's talk about preserving what is known as the Sacred Timeline, and every episode will see Loki in a different decade, inspired by various movies, TV shows of the time, certain historical events, things like that. And one of the things that we might also see are alternate versions of characters, including alternate versions of Loki. That's what Kevin Feige recently teased when he was talking about the Loki series for Entertainment Weekly's upcoming summer preview of upcoming shows. And so he said, quote, "Part of the fun of the multiverse and playing with time is seeing other versions of characters and other versions of the titular character in particular. He's been around for thousands of years. He had all sorts of adventures. We're wanting to fill in the blanks and see how much more of Loki's story was there in the initial desire for the series." So there's a chance that we might see some alternate versions of Avengers or other superheroes popping up. If Loki ends up in different timelines, they don't necessarily have to be the same versions of characters that we are familiar with in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This could be a way of visiting some of the versions of characters that might otherwise never have a chance of appearing in the regular timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where the Avengers reside and they had to deal with Thanos and the Infinity Stones. Because there are a lot of weird alternate takes on characters out there, and there's probably alternate timelines where certain characters live, certain characters died. It probably won't be quite as extreme as what they're going to do with Marvel's What If animated series, but it'll be cool to see how this time jumping allows them to play with the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Do you think there's a chance that we'll see any moments from the previous MCU films play out in different ways? Like, obviously we saw that in Endgame, where we revisited the events of the first Avengers movies from a different angles. Do you think that might happen here, or do you think they're going to stay away
If it
from that?
happens, I don't think it'll be quite on the same scale as it was in Avengers Endgame, where they revisited, these big moments from Avengers movies and whatnot. If anything, maybe we'll get more insight into Loki's perspective during like the events of the Thor movies and things like that. Stuff that maybe we didn't know he was up to, or things that we didn't see happen on the screen in those movies. But otherwise, I feel like they already did that in Avengers Endgame, and they're probably not looking to repeat themselves.
Yeah, and Loki is coming
Starts
out
on June
next
9th.
month, right? Sometime in June? June 9th. Exciting. Okay, we have a bunch more Marvel stuff to talk about. Marvel and Disney just released their Eternals trailer, and they also released a poster which has a little bit of some weird crediting there that have had some people scratching their heads.
So the first poster for Eternals came out today, and even though a lot of people don't normally pay attention to the credits that are listed in tiny print at the bottom of most posters, Marvel fans are pretty keen observers when it comes to looking for little details and hints at things that might be coming in these movies. And someone noticed that the screenplay by credit lists Chloé Zhao and Patrick Burleigh. It lists Chloé Zhao twice as writing the screenplay for the movie, which seems weird. But this is merely just like a technical thing that has to be done in order to adhere to the rules of the Writers Guild of America. Most of the time, if a screenwriter writes a script on their own, a draft of a script, then they get listed on their own. But if there are other individual writers that wrote previous drafts of that script on their own, then it'll say screenplay by Chloé Zhao and Peter Sciretta, with "and" actually spelled out. But if you work on a script as a team with somebody, if it was as in Chloé Zhao and Patrick Burleigh with this movie, then your name is listed as a team with an ampersand in between the names, denoting that they worked together on the script. So what this means is that at some point, Chloé Zhao did a version of the script completely on her own, which is something we learned about earlier this year. But then at another point, Patrick Burleigh was brought in, and he worked on the script with Chloé Zhao together, and whatever they did was enough for them to be credited together as a writing team instead of just having Patrick Burleigh credited as himself as an individual writer.
Yeah, you often don't see this happen because the work on it has to be so substantial to overtake that original script. Like whatever Chloe's original script was, it has to be like, I forget what the percentage is, but it's some huge percentage needs to be changed in order to credit the new team that is on it. That includes Chloe. So, do we think this is going to be like a WGA arbitration thing, or what?
How do you mean?
Do you think like this is something that's being contested, or do you think this is just like the final credits for this movie? I guess they're far enough along. They had the pandemic that this is. I mean,
at some point, for a while, the writers that were being credited were Kaz Firpo and Ryan Firpo, but they're no longer credited as screenwriters. And we learned that when Chloé Zhao was talking about working on the script herself back in January. So it seems like maybe it's not a contested thing. If anything, maybe it could be something that Patrick Burleigh and his representatives pushed for to get a credit, since he did so much work on the script with Chloé Zhao. That could be a possibility, but we don't know the nitty gritty of the behind the scenes yet.
Yeah, it's weird that they couldn't just like come to the agreement of just having those two names and not Chloe and Chloe. And I mean, like it's weird. Is what I'm saying, because yeah. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Eternals, the trailer. I'll put a link to this in the show notes if you want to go watch it. But I thought we'd give our quick reactions to this trailer, and I'll start things off by saying that, boy, this looks different. It looks different. I know Marvel often gets criticized as kind of having the same Marvel formula, or they have the Marvel look to it, like all the costumes and props kind of look of that same style guide, which I think is a feature, not a problem as many people look at it as. I think they're trying to make it look of the same world. But here well, first of all, the trailer opens in a way that almost the Marvel Studios aspect of it is the big reveal. Like you're like, oh, this is a Marvel movie. Has some interesting music to it. It's just, I don't know. I guess my biggest takeaway from this trailer is how strikingly different it looks and feels from other Marvel movies. It almost feels, and I feel like this is going to come off as an insult, but this is not what it is intended. But almost feels like it's like an X-Men universe movie than like a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. And it's not, that's not intended as a insult in any way. It just doesn't feel Disney. I don't know. It even ends with this like bit with them talking about Captain America and Iron Man that feels very out of place and almost like, oh yeah, this is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You're going to want to see this movie. But Chris, what did you think of this trailer?
Fine, I guess. I feel like it's too early. I feel like I don't want to judge the film before I see more of it. I do agree that I like that it looks like it wasn't shot in a parking lot, like every other Marvel movie. That said, I do think it's still weirdly desaturated. Like, I just wish it, like, I love that Chloé Zhao is seems to be trying to get as much natural photography as she can without relying on constant CGI, but I still feel like it has this weird darkened desaturation that kind of immediately takes away from that. It's like, man, they're going through all this effort to make this look different. Why do they then have to desaturate it down? But again, this is just a trailer. Hopefully it'll look better in the film itself on the big screen. I know nothing about the Eternals, but I didn't really know anything about the Guardians of the Galaxy either, and that turned out to be one of, if not my favorite Marvel movie. So I don't want to get too like, what the hell is going on here, but I do feel like the film's like set up where it's like they've been in the shadows for years and now they're coming out. Like, what exactly were they waiting for? Like, so many terrible things have happened in history, and it's like, what now is like, oh, I guess we're gonna get off our asses and do something. Like, I don't know like what they were waiting for. But again, this is all trailer stuff. It could probably play a lot better in the film itself.
That's hilarious because I was going to bring that up, Chris. And I was just thinking in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe of like, New York becoming invaded by, these big aliens and the snap and stuff like that. But you bring up the bigger history of the world into this picture. Yeah,
because aren't they
Hitler,
like, these beings are supposed to be like ancient? They've been around like forever. So they've just been like, what? Just like sitting back. Like, we're not going to help with 9/11 or anything. Just like, we're just going to hang around. But now they're coming. I don't know what, like,
Brad,
I'm
what do you
intrigued
think
so far? I like that the vibe that this teaser is putting out, because especially visually, I think Chloé Zhao's direction is you can really see it here, because there's something about this movie that feels much more organic than the rest of the cosmic entries in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It kind of has a grand scale to it, and not in a blockbuster way like Guardians of the Galaxy or Thor did. There's something about it that just feels a little bit more as grounded as a cosmic Marvel movie like this can be. There's something about it that just looks different, feels different, and I like that. And I like the big ensemble cast. That ending of the trailer does feel a little tacked on, but I do think that there's something amusing and interesting about, I don't know, hearing these ancient beings talk about stuff like that, and like knowing what's going on and having perspectives on what's happening in the universe as if they're watching a big, long, complicated television show. I guess it's just kind of funny, but I do have the same questions that Chris does. Is like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, the snap was kind of a big deal. Maybe you should have helped.
Yeah, no, that was a big deal. Other events in history were big deals. Chris, you brought up Guardians of the Galaxy, and as much as like, I didn't really know about Guardians of the Galaxy before that kind of the movie kicked into gear, but I feel like those characters are so distinctive, and like, there's a talking tree and there's a raccoon, and it's and here this ensemble is a great a great cast of actors. But after watching this trailer 2 times, if I could I don't think I can tell you anything about any of the characters. I know it's a trailer. I get that. I'm not like I feel what you're saying, Chris. Too. It's too early to judge from just like a 2-minute trailer. Completely noted. But I really don't understand who the Eternals are as other than ancient beings that have been sitting in wake for all this time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess for me, what I'm curious about is Marvel has always been character first. Like, it's not like Star Wars. Star Wars is this epic universe, like this galaxy, and there's these creatures and whatever. And Star Wars in Marvel for me has always been character centric. It's about Iron Man, Tony Stark. It's about Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and I don't quite know who these Eternals are yet. And I do have some comics sitting on my desk that I need to read, but I don't know if this early marketing is doing a good job at selling the characters. Brad, what do you think?
I think that they have a lot of time to figure that out. The movie doesn't come out until November. They still have Black Widow coming out between now and then. I think this is just getting the gears turning, introducing the characters, not on an individual basis, just an idea that they exist. They've been around for a long time, and that I'm sure we'll learn much more about them in the marketing leading up to the movie in November.
Yes, and I'm sure they're going to be a huge part of the MCU going forward. So any Marvel fan is not going to want to miss this. But we'll keep our eye on this as more marketing and stuff comes out for it. I'm sure they'll eventually have the big wave where everybody gets their own TV spot and movie poster and all that stuff. So I'm sure it's just early days. You got to introduce the concept that there was these ancient beings around all along. I just wonder how much longer can Marvel explain people being around and not doing anything during these. That seems to be like the main crux of like explaining anything in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I guess we've discussed in previous episodes of this podcast, opening up the multiverse, I guess, can explain that stuff away. But okay. That does it for us for today's Slash Film Daily. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast on Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please rate and review this podcast in iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.